Hi, I'm Carly Walminster. I'm here with Sonia Keating and David O'Connor, and today we're going to be having a conversation about USEF's rules and horse welfare. So Sonia, what is so important for our members to know about GR 838?
So the most important thing for the members to know is that it prohibits any action or inaction that may compromise a horse's health, safety, or well-being. And that could include anything that causes or may cause pain, unnecessary discomfort, or puts a horse in obvious distress.
And from a jurisdiction standpoint, I know we've talked a lot about jurisdiction and USEF's jurisdiction versus where we have it, where we don't. How do you define that for the members? What is important to know about what USEF can and can't do?
So what's important to know is that beginning in December of 2024, GR 838, the unethical treatment of the horse rule, changed and broadened the scope of where USEF could take jurisdiction. And so in other words, what that means is now any type of prohibited conduct that occurs off of horse show grounds that involves a horse that is registered with USEF or is competing in a USEF competition, USEF can take formal regulatory action against a wrongdoer.
And in terms of widening that scope of jurisdiction, what was the motivation behind that?
The motivation, in part, was that times have changed. So I think back when this rule was implemented decades ago, prior to USEF's existence, there was very little opportunity to enforce anything that was happening at home. USEF is a regulatory body, but we are administrative in nature, so we do not have subpoena power. We don't have the power to obtain a warrant to go into people's personal property, and we still don't. But what's really changed is social media. And now pretty much everybody is carrying a camera and a video device in their pocket, and there is an ability to kind of secure that evidence, if you will. And there was also an outcry from the membership that USEF was not doing enough, and they needed to hold people accountable for what was happening off grounds.
When we think about tradition and we think about what used to be versus what is now, I feel like our community evolves, our industry evolves, and the rules have to evolve with that. What do you, David, in your experience looking back versus now, feel like are the most important things that we need to be addressing as a community in terms of the rules that we have around sport?
I think one of the big things, society has changed, right? Because 80 years ago, everybody would have seen a horse every day of their lives, and now that doesn't happen. So you have people that are looking at it from an outside and not necessarily always an objective point of view, but a subjective point of view and an emotion. And so that side of the equation of how you do that. The good thing about when you put these type of rules forward, I believe, and this is the honest to God truth from deep of my soul, is that in the end, when you put these rules forward, there ends up being the betterment for the horse. Yeah. Right? It puts the horse first, and it puts their place. Now people have to change how they were brought up or how they were thought about it in the last 50 years, and it's always going to be that the horses are first, and you end up having to think about it a little different. Might take longer, it might be truer, but the horses win. And I think that has been, no matter where you go in the rules and all that kind of stuff, in the end the horses are going to win, and that's got to be the priority.
In the conversation around social licensing and the public perception that we talked about, what is the impact of the rules there? What do you think these rule changes will do to ultimately improve the social license around the sport?
Well, I think one of the things you're looking at, if you look at farther down the road, you're trying to change a culture, right? And so by changing the culture, sometimes you have to change it from a technical point of view, and you have to talk about it by talking about it, like we are here. So when you have that culture shift, there's going to be resistance from certain people at certain times, whatever, this is how I've always done it, how dare you tell me? But in the end, like I said, I think the horses they always win in the end. And so in that culture change, as you start to switch that, for people to know where the game is, because we are a competitive organization. I mean, we want to compete, and we want to compete at the very top level and have that be successful. So being clear about where those boundaries are and figuring it out is really important, that everybody understands that. When those boundaries are clear, and those stepping out of the boundaries are dealt with,
Yeah.
and not just, okay, well, we'll just let them
Right.
go.
Right.
That ends up being a very, very strong message, and everybody understands what that game is, right? And they, and you know, as a competitor, you want to beat the game. So being very, very clear about what that game is, and that it's within the boundaries of what horses can do, and not the shortcuts that end up causing a lot of the problem. People are trying to get there too quick, or they're trying to get something done that is just unacceptable at the time.
When we're thinking about, you know, people reporting and who can report, what is the chain of process? So say, you know, there is a violation, who is responsible for handling that as soon as they see it? What's the pattern that needs to happen there to make sure that it gets through to the final endpoint with your team?
Any participant at a USEF license competition that observes any mistreatment or unethical treatment of the horse now has a mandatory duty to report that to the officials at the competition. Now they can be ensured that that's going to get reported back to USEF, because the officials will report that in their post-comp reports. There is encouragement that any inappropriate or mistreatment of the horse that occurs off grounds unrelated to competition, that's reported to USEF as well, and to the authorities when appropriate.
And what's the role of the official in enforcing rules?
So the officials play a critical role. They can enforce on the ground, and that is encouraged. There's some conduct that may cross that line, but may not be egregious in nature.
Yeah.
And the best way to address it might be to intervene, to verbally warn somebody, have a chat with somebody. But they can also do a written warning, and they can eliminate and disqualify if the circumstances justify it. The official will report everything back to USEF, and USEF always retains the right to impose additional penalties if the situation warrants it.
And when we're thinking too about what the repercussions are for those actions, I know that there's a lot of how do I want to say this?
Misconceptions?
Misconceptions, yeah. There's a lot of misconceptions around what the penalty process is and how that works. And so if there was something that happened on a showgrounds immediately, what would be the chain of action?
So if something happens on the showgrounds immediately, we would expect that if an official or management did not observe it or didn't happen in the competition ring, that a participant would report it to an official. The official will then look into it and take whatever action is appropriate at that time, and they'll report it back to USEF. There's some actions that need swift attention, and there's others that probably need more of a thorough investigation, if you will.
Yep.
And then the consequences or any disciplinary action would follow that.
And so it's not a one size fits all. It's every situation is handled to what the report is. So
Absolutely, yes.
And the officials are really kind of the first line.
Right.
You know, there might be lines afterwards, but you know, but the official is the first line, you know, of making the judgment within the rules and within the construct that we have within the sporting world.
Yeah.
And that's the first line, and they should make the first judgment call of what needs to be done. If it's egregious, there's first action needs to be able to stop the action.
And it's important for competitors to know who their officials are.
Absolutely, and trust them, right? And know that they're educated. That's the job of the federation. We are a sporting organization, the USEF, so you know, there's no question that if the rules are clear and they're enforceable that way, and the education process of the officials and also their personal experience judgment comes in, that trust has to be there. I think that would be the same in any sport, not just horse sports.
I know that officials have a really hard job. They have a really hard job in the field. They have to make calls. What do these rules help the officials? Does it help them have more power? Does it give them more confidence to speak up in those moments? What do you guys feel like is the most important thing about how these rules will help support the officials?
Yeah, I would say that power may be a word that would be quite strong, because they're not looking to do that. You would rather just everybody understands and stays with it, and so those judgments have to go. But when those lines get broken, that person then has that ability, and they would have the confidence because they have the knowledge behind it through their own personal experience, through the rules, that they can make a judgment call of, all right, this is we need to go here within this, and this is why.
Yep.
And that's really important, that it's understandable to everybody, understandable to the person playing the game, and it's understandable to the rules, so that it's very, very much a consistent deal, right? And people want that consistency, and that's where the trust comes from.
So another important note about the change to GR 838 is that previously the official was restricted on taking any action other than reporting it to the Federation.
Okay.
So they could not take any action around, abuse or any maltreatment to the horse, if you will. Now they are strongly encouraged to do so. So there were a lot of reports that would come in on conduct that it's not okay, but it wasn't so egregious.
Yep.
It needed to be addressed on the spot. It
Yep.
needed to be dealt with on the spot, and that was the most appropriate way to resolve it.
And so that avenue now exists. for the
Absolutely.
officials.
Yes, it does.
So, David, talk about this new system that USEF has with the warnings and with the yellow cards. It seems like that brings us more in alignment with other sports.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of other sports use different things. If you think about soccer, soccer's got that one that on the field, official on the field makes a play of, let's say, giving a yellow card, which is just a warning, right? And if it happens again, or if it's even more egregious or wrong, then a red card can come out and you're actually thrown out of the game. So in our world, we have a little bit a newer system that we promoted here this year about using recorded warning. So the first thing could be just a warning. Hey, don't do that, right? That's going to be in trouble, and so it's not like you're going to get suspended right off the bat or go in front of a hearing or whatever. There could be just an official that says, hey, that action needs to stop. And so the recorded warnings, and then next would be a yellow card for something that's more serious. And then with that, after that you would get into other disciplinary actions and like that. But that first thing is to help. Right? It's like, that's out of bounds, right? And so don't do that again. And I think that gives a lot of confidence, I think, to the membership, and I think to the person that's playing in the game, where they might not realize that they are out of bounds at that point, and somebody coming in from the outside to stop the cycle has got to be the first step. And they realize, okay, you're right, okay, and that's what official has to have the confidence to do, and I think these rules behind it gives the confidence to the officials to be able to do that, to stand on solid ground, because this is why I'm in the rule book, and I think that's really important for everybody to have the confidence, which then builds the credibility, right? And the credibility is the thing that builds the trust, and then that, when we talk about going back to social license, that's the things that the organization needs to be able to have that outside social license, to be able to, that we are playing the game in a right way.
And I think, too, that brings up a good point, though, that if you're competing, you have to be open to accepting that feedback, too. If you're having a moment where things aren't going your way, you have to be open to somebody saying, hey, maybe it's time to take a pause on that.
And I think there's a real part about being human there in any sport, whether you're in basketball or football or soccer or baseball, whatever. There are times, right? And somebody's stepping in from the outside to say, hey, that's, just take a break. Just take a break. And I think that's really important as we keep the horses, keeping the horses priority, as the priority, right? And making sure that somebody is flipping a switch. Hey, you got to keep them as the priority, not just your competition.
It's the most important part, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you said a word, Sonia, earlier that I think is really interesting, and progressive disciplinary action. Like, it's progressive in terms of how we're handling it, trying to be more proactive than reactive in those situations by giving the officials more confidence, to your point, David, and credibility to move forward with addressing it.
Absolutely. And we hope to see that this progressive discipline path, if you will, that it is effective. Now, there are going to be some circumstances where actions are just simply too egregious to be addressed with a recorded warning or a yellow card, and they're going to call for more stringent penalties. But I think a lot of what we see falls more into the bucket that David has described, and a lot of it's probably more emotional responses or frustrations that can be addressed on the spot, and that can be addressed with, to David's point, just taking the time out.
And what about the education for the members, David, around this topic do you think is important?
Well, for one, it's talking about it, right? And making
Yeah.
sure, because we know that everybody don't go off and every night go read
Yeah.
the rule book. I mean,
Right.
that just doesn't happen.
Right.
Though it could put you to sleep fairly quickly, I think. So, so being able to talk about it, right? And using the platforms that we have, whether you're using social media, whether you're using video, because people learn by pictures right off the bat, and the actions you take, that is, I think, the way to get that message out.
Yeah.
That you're saying this is the direction and this is why we need to go down this road. So being able to socialize it in lots of different forms, I think, has to be our responsibility about putting this as a message, and as a message to say, this is a direction that we all believe in, right? Because I think when you really get down to it, the members believe in that
Right,
direction
right,
also.
right.
Right. So
I think
but
it's
this
for
is how we do
people, all
it.
of us do.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And for members who want to get involved in the process, if they have ideas, if they have thoughts on how USEF could implement a welfare rule, or maybe there's an angle of the welfare rule, how would somebody go about doing that?
So we welcome feedback, and we really appreciate feedback. And this is going to take the community, right? We need the entire community to be involved in this. And so we do have an email set up, feedback@usef.org, and we welcome feedback. There's also the rule change process. So individuals, they can independently propose a change to the rules. They could go directly to a committee and provide their proposed solution and have that go through the committee process. Or, as I mentioned, just simply send an email to feedback@usef.org. And all of that is being read and considered.
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you, David. I feel like that was a really authentic conversation with a lot of good information that our members need to be able to understand as we continue to roll out more welfare rules and ultimately keep with putting the horse first in everything that we do. For more information, you can visit www.usef.org and visit our horse welfare page that is linked to the rulebook, links to some of these resources for more information.